This is episode 1 of the Draft Geeks podcast, guys. This is Jace and Max. We'll intro ourselves in a little bit. Today, we're going to bring you a first round mock draft 1.0 for us. It's starting right about Senior Bowl time. You know that the draft starts in Mobile, and right now, the Draft Geeks podcast starts now.
What's up, y'all? I'm Max. I run the Draft Geek over on Instagram. Been running the account for over 5 years. Love covering the draft. Jason and I recently got this idea, start a podcast. We figured what better time to start than right around Senior Bowl week, giving you our pre-Senior Bowl mock draft 1.0. We're going to alternate picks back and forth, give you a little bit of everything. Every team needs, ultimately making our selection. But just really happy to be able to be starting this show late January, early February, depending on when this gets out, but recorded late January. And yeah, looking forward to bringing you guys draft content all throughout the draft and then extending beyond that.
Yeah, I'm excited. We talked about this about a month ago, reached out to you. I run at the Patriots Drive. It is on the Instagram. Also, we have a YouTube channel. I'm a Patriots fan. Max is a Ravens fan. So a couple fans here that run fan pages, but, been following the draft for years and kind of got this idea just because we wanted to talk a little bit more draft, bring you guys content. So yeah, mock draft 1.0 today, but man, we got big things in store. You can see all the graphics we have. We already have this stuff rolling, but Senior Bowl coverage, combine coverage, big boards, position rankings, all that fun stuff that you guys love about the draft and we love about the draft, we're going to be bringing to you on this podcast. So hopefully you guys like it. If you do, hit the like button, subscribe, and then follow us on Apple or Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. But you ready to start this mock draft?
Yeah, let's get it.
I'm super pumped for this. So we're going to use PFF's mock draft simulator. I'm pull this up right here real quick. Like we said, we're going to alternate. So I mentioned I'm a Patriots fan. Max is a Ravens fan, so I will take even picks, and Max will take the odd picks. That way we both get a draft for our team just for the first round. But this is just a first-round mock draft, so jump right into this. You want to start us off, and you're on the clock with the odd pick with the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah, so the Titans, they'll be on the clock for a little bit. We're not going to do trades, but I think they've made it very clear that business is open over there in Tennessee. They've recently had, some changes in their front office, talked about not passing up on a generational talent. So whether that's them referencing Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, people have been going back and forth on that, but it's still really early. Still every bluff is in effect. So they could be, calling somebody generational in a class that they don't think anybody's generational. Who really knows? It's really early. I think we'll find out a lot more down the road. But I think, PFF agrees. I think their number one glaring need is quarterback. And QB1 for me is abundantly, clearly Cam Ward. And I think Cam Ward immediately elevates the Tennessee Titans. They have a long way to go. But I think he's a good kickstart to the rebuild. I think he'd give Brian Callahan his own quarterback and really get a head start for the new regime in Tennessee.
Cool. Well, yeah, I think this is an interesting conversation. We'll take Cam Ward here. I'll talk about him. I agree. I have Cam Ward as my quarterback one. I think all three of these teams, being the Titans, the Browns, and the Giants, are all quarterback needy teams. So it's going to be interesting because there are a lot of players that I have ranked above. This is a weak quarterback class. So are there going to be guys like Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, or one of those guys going to fit in and go above these two quarterbacks? But man, it's hard to do what you want to do, especially when you're an offensive-minded head coach like Brian Callahan, without the starting quarterback and him being kind of a guy to run your franchise and your offense. So I agree. I think Cam Ward is heading or far above as on the quarterback list. I don't have anyone close to him.
No.
So that's going to put us on the Cleveland Browns for me. Again, I mentioned it. I think that they're a quarterback-needy team. We'll see what happens with Myles Garrett. There's been trade rumors. I don't think that they should trade Myles Garrett, but maybe they will because he has made it clear he does not want to be a part of a rebuild if that's kind of where they're going. And we'll see. These guys are in kind of cap space hell because of the Deshaun Watson trade. So these guys don't have much to do. I've debated it because that Shadur Sanders and Deion Sanders are not going to go down without a fight. They might Eli Manning it and say, hey, we are not going to play for the Browns. So I'm going to kind of go with that route, make it a little bit interesting. And I'm going to say that they're going to take Abdul Carter. They're going to pair him up, get a younger stud pass rusher. Now, this pains me to say because I want the Patriots to have a chance to take Abdul Carter. I think he would be great. But I think if you're sitting here at number 2 and you're like, hey, Myles Garrett doesn't want to be a part of a pass rush or a part of a rebuild, or hey, let's just pair these two and have a dynamic pass rush. So I'm going to say that Deion throws a fit. I'm going to say that Shadur doesn't want to go there, and I'm going to take Abdul Carter to the Cleveland Browns with the 2nd overall pick.
And I think that's something that could be a blessing in disguise for Cleveland, to be quite honest. I mentioned Cam Ward's my QB1, but he's not in the top 10 on my big board. And there's a big gap between him and the next quarterback, which I'll spoil now, is not Shadur Sanders for me. But this mock draft won't reflect that because, where it's a little bit of what we would do, but also a little bit of what we think is going to happen. I know that right now, at least, Shadur Sanders is pretty clearly the QB2 in NFL draft circles. So the Giants come on the clock. And whether, by the way, Abdul Carter, whether it's aside Myles Garrett or Myles Garrett gets traded, now they have the replacement. I think that's a great pick. But the Giants are on the clock. And, if Travis Hunter goes to Cleveland, I think it's tough because the Giants are a really weak team right now, but they do have a lot on their D line. They have Kayvon Thibodeau, Brian Burns, whether you consider him an outside linebacker, he's a pass rusher. They have Dexter Lawrence. So I'm not sure Abdul Carter is really a great, fit for them. He's a great player. He's going to be the number 1 pick, number 1 player on a lot of people's big boards. But the other guy that might be the number 1 player on a lot of people's big boards is still here. And that's going to be my pick for the Giants. I think Travis Hunter is a fascinating player. The word generational gets thrown out a lot. And to me, I think it's the most overused draft term because you have a generational player, it seems like, every year. But truly, in my generation, we have not seen a player do what Travis Hunter is projected to be able to do at the NFL, because I think to say that he won't play both ways is crazy. I think if you have a guy that's playing every single snap of the college football game and you're like, no, he's not going to play both ways in the NFL. I think you're doing yourself a disservice. I don't think he plays 100% of the snaps or even close to it in the NFL, but I think he's a corner first for me. But I think if you play him 95 to 100% of snaps on defense, the Giants corner room immediately gets better. Young pieces like Deonte Banks and Drew Phillips. Travis Hunter in that room immediately makes it a really good corner room in a division with Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, all quarterbacks aside from Jalen Hurts, but they have great receivers. But, they got to protect against some really good wide receivers and some good passing attacks in that division. And then on the receiving side of the ball, Travis Hunter and Malik Neighbors, that sounds good to me. So if you can get Travis Hunter playing 95 to 100% of snaps for the Giants on defense, they're immediately better. And then I think you have 10 to 20 plays on offense where Travis Hunter comes in and plays. And Wan'Dale Robinson was impressive this year. So you're going to have 10 plays, 20 plays with Hunter, Neighbors, and Wan'Dale. And then, I think the Giants still, if they make this pick, they can invest in free agency or later in the draft in a 3rd wide receiver. But I think this Travis Hunter pick for the Giants satisfies a lot of needs for them. And while quarterback is the biggest need, and they're going to need to fix it, and Joe Shane and Brian Dable need to keep their jobs, that's their goal. So, and they got to sell tickets. It's going to be tough. But I think the Giants, their best move for them, if Cam Ward is there, is to take him. And if not, I think they have to go in a different direction, because I really don't think Shadur Sanders elevates that franchise as much as a player like Travis Hunter does.
See, and I think this is super interesting because I feel like the Giants, they feel pressure, right? There was rumors that Dable was going to be fired. Same with the GM. And so if Shadur Sanders were to fall here, that's like the dream fit for everyone, right? Is Shadur to New York. That would be hard for me in my mind to want to have them pass up. But I agree with you. A guy like Travis Hunter is going to elevate the whole franchise. I don't have Shadur as high as this pick. Doesn't mean that he won't go that high. But I think it would be hard for New York and Giants fans to potentially pass on him. But I do like that pick. Now, I will say this is kind of a nightmare scenario for me as a Patriots fan. I would want Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter on the board for the Patriots. If this were the scenario, I would want them to trade down. Hopefully, maybe Vegas feels like, oh, we can trade up right here. That would be my ideal scenario. I know we're not going to do that.
That's a great scenario too.
And so it's like a nightmare scenario, but then it's also not if you can get the trade, right? That's the key, is if you can get the trade. I just did a mock draft for the Patriots. I had them taking Mason Graham. I personally am going to take Teteroa McMillan. I am high on Tet McMillan. Now, yes, the Patriots need offensive line. The two offensive line guys, in my opinion, Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks, probably aren't worthy of the 4th overall pick. So if they were to trade down, then you could take a tackle. I love Teteroa McMillan. I think he gives me Mike Evans vibes. His size, yeah, he's not going to run a 4.4 40. He might be in the low 4.5s, but he is a vertical, or he's a big threat down the field. He can stretch the field vertically and can run past guys, deceivingly fast, freakish athlete. I think that him and Drake May could be a tandem that would start forever. Now, this is the funny argument, and me being a Patriots fan, and I hear this all the time on my pages. Well, hey, you got to build the offensive line. Okay, yeah, the Detroit Lions took Penei Sewell and built the offensive line. They're a really good team. You know who else took a receiver and paired him with Joe Burrow? The Cincinnati Bengals. They made a Super Bowl. So you've seen teams do it both ways. Right now, the best value on the board, in my opinion, is Teteroa McMillan, and that's who I'm going to take for the New England Patriots. Finally, getting a wide receiver 1, pairing him with Drake May. I think it's going to be fun with Josh McDaniels, having him as the offensive coordinator again, putting together a pretty good staff, keep developing Drake May, have Teteroa McMillan come in and be a big outside receiver and a threat for Drake May.
And look, the Pats need receiver. It's got to be with pick 4 or their 2nd round pick. They have to address receiver, and they have to address it early. To me, Tet's, I'll spoil it a little bit, but Tet's not my wide receiver 1, but I think this receiver class is a lot of pick your flavor. So if you want an X wide receiver to play on the outside, then Tet's the wide receiver 1. And I think that pairs really well with Drake May. So if you're going to have a quarterback, like I see Tet mocked to the Raiders a lot at 6. I don't like that fit. Because whether the Raiders are going to stick with, Aiden O'Connell, maybe they bring back Gardner Minshew or a free agent of that caliber. Maybe Pete Carroll brings in Russell Wilson. And sure, Russell Wilson throws the moon ball. But I need a quarterback on Tet McMillan's team to constantly stretch the ball downfield like Noah Fafita did in 2023. Now he took a step back in 2024, but that's the goal with Tet McMillan. His average depth of target's incredible compared to the rest of the class. He's got to go downfield. He's not a burner, like you mentioned, but once he gets the ball in his hands and he does his little spin move after the catch, he's gone, which is really rare for a 6'5 receiver. I have my concerns about maybe some drops, some deceleration speed when he's running comebacks. And he's, 6'5", but he's 212. So there's some questions with the frame there, not the height portion of the frame, just the build. But I do like the fit at 4, whether it's Tet, whether it's Mason Graham, somebody like that. Which
I will say one thing I like about Tet McMillan. He had 9 less catches than Travis Hunter, but he also had like 20 or less yards after the catch. So you think of Travis Hunter as this dynamic dude with the ball in his hands. Yeah, he had more catches than Teteroa McMillan, but Teteroa McMillan was only like 20 yards behind him. He can create after the catch. He can run through arm tackles. He's pretty good. He's not like the most dynamic guy. I get it. He's not, but he has yard after the catch ability. And I think that's what the Patriots are missing. And, I know Luther Bird and some of those guys do. They all have yard after the catch ability, but for Tet's size, he has good yak. And I like that out of him.
He does. And I think that's kind of the problem with the comp. Like I watched him. And so it's not as much Mike Evans for me. I kind of landed on 2 things. It's like Cortland Sutton, because Cortland can give you a little burst after the catch, but I don't think he's got Cortland's build. And then it's like AJ Brown's play style inside of like 6'5" Michael Wilson. If you can picture the frame, Michael Wilson's not 6'5", but like 6'2", 6'3", but that kind of build with AJ Brown's play style where AJ Brown can really get you after the catch. You can throw it up. He can win. And then also there's going to be some games where he might not be as productive, which to be honest, I think that you might get that from Tet, but because he can go up and get the jump ball, if he's not having his best game, just throw it up to him. And Drake May will do that. There's not every quarterback of these top 10 teams picking in the draft is going to be able to do that. So I think it's a good fit for New England. And I kind of teased it earlier, saying the Pats could either go Tet, they could go Mason Graham. I think Jacksonville, Mason Graham sitting right here, not going to pass on him. He's going to be an amazing presence for Jacksonville. They have so much to work on. And Liam Cohen just got there, had a really interesting press conference.
Yes.
But I think there's not a better way to set the tone for a team that's been, it's been easy to push around since the Saxonville days. So I think Mason Graham is immediately a cornerstone of that defense. He's somebody that I like a lot. I think he's a top 3 to 5 player in this class. Jacksonville getting him at 5. It's hard to get good value at 5, and I think this is a really good value pick, really good instant impact player that the Jaguars need.
I love Mason Graham. He's just doesn't quite have the weight on him or the length on him like Jalen Carter did coming out, but he is uber productive. He gets after you in the run. He gets after you in the pass. I like Mason Graham. I think that I said, it's funny because I'm kind of contradicting what I said the other day on my mock draft for the Patriots. I said that there's probably only a few players that I would take at the 4th overall pick if Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter are gone. And I thought Mason Graham was one of them. He's worthy of a top 5 pick. That position, you've seen what a disruptive interior defensive lineman can do with Jalen Carter, Aaron Donald. Those dudes are hard to come by, and I think Mason Graham has that potential and has that ability. So I love that. Stacking up the defensive side for the Jaguars, getting the front 7 a little bit more bulky and a little bit more production. So I think this is a dream scenario for the Raiders. I don't agree with it. I would not do it, but I think that if if Vegas is sitting on the clock right here and Shedeur is still there somehow, I know the Pete Carroll thing probably kind of maybe complicates it a little bit. They're going to say, oh, is Russ going to come? We'll know by draft time, but I think that the only other spot that is like, oh, Shedeur Sanders, this big name guy, Deion Sanders' son, he fits in New York. He fits in Las Vegas too. And so I'm going to take Shedeur to the Raiders here at 6. Like I said, I wouldn't do it. I don't think that this quarterback class is very good. I do think Cam Ward has the potential to be a good quarterback. Shedeur is still questions how his game's going to translate to the NFL. But if he's sitting here at 6, I think that the Raiders jump all over that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's been something that's been talked about quite some time, his relationship with Brady's involvement in that pick. And the Raiders, I saw a lot of just discourse about the Pete Carroll hiring. It's like, great, he's awesome. Does he play quarterback? No. The Raiders have needed a quarterback.
In some videos, he does play quarterback. Not very good, but
true. That's true. But I actually think, hey, a Russ signing could benefit Shedeur. Maybe he doesn't have to get on the field right away. And, I think he's got some things to work out with, trusting that he can survive in a pocket, knowing that he is not going to break out of the pocket, break, contain, and scramble for 50 yards, because sometimes he plays like he's going to. And while, you might think Deion's son can do that, it's not Shedeur's game. So I think, taking a step back, refining his game, getting some experience with Brady, if that's what he needs, I think that's a good fit at 6. Leading into 7, I think both quarterbacks being off the board is good for the Jets. They're not going to be tempted to, take Shedeur. If Ward is here at 7, by all means. I think you and I have both made it clear that those two aren't really in the same tier as each other. Ward is head above the rest for me. And I think the Jets, I've seen this pick once, and it was really recent in the Daniel Jeremiah's most recent mock draft. But I kind of thought of it a week or so ago. The Jets kind of need everything on the offensive side of the ball, and they're really unpredictable what they're going to be next year. Is Rodgers back? If Rodgers is gone, is Devontae gone? Does Garrett Wilson want out? I don't know. But I can't remember the last time the Jets had a weapon at tight end. And I think this is the spot to change that and really get somebody that can not only be a security blanket for a young quarterback or a bridge quarterback, but can also lead a wide receiver room like he did last year at Penn State. And that's Tyler Warren. He can bring you special packages. He can bring you a valuable option over the middle. He will stretch the field. He had drop issues in 2023, got rid of them in 2024. This prospect ascended all season last season. I think he has a chance to ascend his way into the top 10, whether it's with the Jets or there's a sneaky fit with actually PFF's got one of the needs for the Saints at 9 as tight end. So Jets and Saints, I think those are the top 10 spots to watch for Warren. If not, I think he's a Colt.
Hey, and listen, I love Tyler Warren. I'm going to say it. Jets fans probably are wishing they took Brock Bowers last year. If they have to take Tyler Warren at 7, they probably wish they should have took it Brock Bowers at what was it, 10 or 11, somewhere in that range. They're probably wishing, gosh, we probably should have taken Brock Bowers. I do like Tyler Warren. This is interesting, right? Tight end kind of gets the same rap as running back and linebacker. It's like, gosh, is it worthy of this pick? This would be a higher pick than Brock Bowers. It's a little bit below what you saw Kyle Pitts drafted a couple years ago. He had a great season, man. This dude was a freak, carried Penn State in the passing game. He was awesome. So I do like that. positional fit, I do think that there is a need for tight end there, no matter who's throwing the ball. And I think that makes sense to me. It's probably a little bit high, but man, I love the player. I love the player.
Yeah.
I have no complaints against him. So moving on to the Carolina Panthers. Man, this is another guy that I think is really good for that's still on the board. I think Will Johnson right here. I don't see how he can slide any farther. The needs for Carolina on the defensive side are pretty high. The other guy is Malachi Starks. Like those two guys right there still being on the board right here makes sense because two quarterbacks went above them that aren't better players. But if he were to fall this far, I think that Carolina is going to jump on Will Johnson, take him, pair him with J.C. Horn, who is starting to kind of catch his stride after he was a early pick. But take another one in Will Johnson and maybe have a very dynamic secondary. So I'll take Will Johnson to the Panthers with the 8th overall pick.
And the problem with the Panthers was as Bryce Young started developing, they couldn't win because they kept giving up so many points.
Yes.
And we kind of saw it with Atlanta too. When Penix started taking off, it's like, well, they can't get stops.
Yep.
So, you can have the young quarterback and you can have the blossoming offense with maybe a good young core. And then when they come off the field, you got to stop the other offense. So I think Will Johnson kind of starts the process of potentially ascending the Carolina Panthers to potentially a playoff contender in the NFC. And, they're in the NFC South. So sometimes you have to win 9 games to be a playoff contender in that division. Speaking of the NFC South, we'll stay right there in the Saints. The Saints need trenches. So that's the direction I'm going to go. And it's kind of been a theme for the Saints for the last 2-3 drafts where it's like, hey, trenches. And then they address them and then they draft Trevor Penning. And while he's started to develop, whether it's guard or tackle, I think Trevor Penning, I think he's going to be a guard as he continues to, find a home in the NFL. They drafted Fuaga last year. Fuaga had a really good start to his career. So if I'm going to say they need another guard, I'm putting Will Campbell next to Fuaga, and that's terrifying.
Yes.
I think the Saints, if they can take Will Campbell, and, they have Kamara at running back. They have Kendre Miller at running back. If they want to, replace Kamara in the next year or two, I know his contract's a little difficult. But I think starting to really build out that offensive line and finally make it a strength for the Saints, I think that's how they elevate this team in the future.
I love Will Campbell. Spoiler, he's my offensive tackle 3, but if he plays interior line, he would be my number 1 guy. And that's the hard thing with Will Campbell is, hey, do you want to take an interior offensive line this high? But he's a hell of a player, man. He's been a multi-year starter in the SEC. He's been damn good for them. He's a culture guy. He's going to play his ass off. Hard-nosed. I love Will Campbell. It's just the debate is, hey, he's probably a guard, so is he worthy of a top 10 pick as a guard? But yeah, New Orleans needs they need trench help, and you put him in the interior, he's gonna bring you instant impact. So I'm gonna stick on the offensive line. I think that the Chicago Bears, they got Caleb Williams, they got their head coach in Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson's been a part of the Lions, who has been one of the best offenses in the NFL. So you're looking at it and you're like, hey, yeah, they've had a really good running game. They've also had good offensive line play. I love Josh Simmons. I think his length is there for the offensive line, but I need to see him healthy and his knee is going to hold up to take him this high. So I'm going to take Kelvin Banks. I think he's the safer pick here. Put him at left tackle. Now you can slide Darnell Wright inside because that's probably where he belongs. He's thrived there a little bit more. So I'm going to take Kelvin Banks to the Bears and hopefully build that offensive line for Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson.
Would you have taken, would you have taken Will Campbell if he was there?
Probably not. Okay. For the Bears,
for the tackle reason, yeah,
probably not. Probably not because I think they need a true tackle, and I think Kelvin Banks fits. He can play inside, but he can also play outside a little bit easier than I see Will Campbell playing. So I was leaning Josh Simmons or Kelvin Banks. But like I said, I need to see Josh Simmons do some more stuff coming off of that injury he had before I can project him as this high of a pick.
Yeah, I like it. Moving to the 49ers, I think they kind of have a lot of needs on the defensive side of the ball. They got a lot of star power there, but I think they've invested a lot of money into Nick Bosa, Fred Warner. And I think it's just about, filling in the pieces around them. And this is, the last time the 49ers picked this high was when they picked Nick Bosa at 3 overall, and they've kind of been in the 20s or 30s ever since then. And I'm going to have them go with another edge rusher in this spot. And I kind of debated back and forth, Mike Green, James Pierce. And I think they're both really talented players, both really close players on my big board. But I'm going to go with James Pierce here. I think that him playing under Nick Bosa or on the same defense can kind of help unlock another level of James Pierce. And I think if James Pierce can tap into that other level, it's going to be what we saw him introduced as this August before that, when everybody was like, this is the number 1 overall pick. And obviously this is the number 11 overall pick, but it's still early in the first round. I think James Pierce Jr. can add an extra element that the 49ers defense needs.
And I think the only knock for me on James Pierce is his consistency. When you talk about dudes that can rush the passer, Abdul Carter, Mike Green, and James Pierce are the 3 best in this class. They are elite off the edge. They are twitchy. He just needs to be a little bit more consistent. But Robert Saleh's back as DC. That's a freaking good hire. They've had a great amount of pass rushers, so I don't have any problem with the with the Niners doing that and building them up. So 12th, okay, Brian Schottenheimer announced as the new head coach for the Dallas Cowboys. Is it a match made in heaven that Ashton Genty's still here? Right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, yep. I think this one is where it makes sense. The other one I thought of taking was Luther Burden, because I think that they could use another receiver alongside of CeeDee Lamb. But I think if Ashton Genty's here, this is a match made in heaven for them. They need a running back. Ashton Genty had one of the best years of production in college football that we've seen since Barry Sanders. It makes too much sense to me that he's sitting here. And so I'm going to go with Ashton Genty to the Dallas Cowboys, and Jerry Jones and Brian Schottenheimer get their guy.
It's a great pick. There's not much else to say about that. I think they would sprint that card in next. Miami's on the clock. Pretty simple there. Best running back. That
would be one of the times where they're like, hey, you have to wait at least 4 minutes to turn the card. And Jerry's like,
no, get our commercials in.
I want to get it in right now. I want him to be flying to Dallas in 2 minutes. He's on my private jet. So yeah.
So Miami comes up at 13. I know there's some uncertainty with the Javon Holland situation. And I think whether or not that situation works out in Miami's favor or not, I think Malachi Starks is too good not to pick here.
Yes.
I think Miami needs a tone setter on defense. I think Malachi Starks can do that. I think his tape in 2023 is a little bit better than 2024, but you're still getting a really, really good player. And I think it's time for Miami to kind of reform their identity as a football team. And they're not just a bunch of smaller speed guys. I think Malachi Starks can kind of bring a tone setter to the defense. He's a good coverage player, good tackler, really everything you want out of a safety that you're going to pick in the top 20. And I think this is a really good spot, especially with Campbell and Banks off the board. I think this would be a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, this guy has all the talent in the world, too. This is another one that's like, when I had Will Campbell on the board for the Panthers, I'm like, gosh, this guy has way more talent than what we're taking at 7. Malachi Starks has no reason being the 13th overall pick talent-wise alone. But, yeah, safety, you're probably sliding him down. But that would be fun. Kind of bring back the Minkah Fitzpatrick vibes maybe when he was with Miami. So this one's hard, man. I wish you didn't take Tyler Warren because it's a perfect fit. I don't want to take Colston Loveland. In a world, I don't feel like that they're going to take 2 tight ends in the top 15. Last year, the Colts got Leatu Latu, and I think that was a steal. I'm going to have them taking Mike Green right here, pairing him up. That's a nasty pass rush duo, Leatu Latu and Mike Green coming off the edge. Yeah, they need help on the offensive side of the ball, maybe one more receiver, but I just don't think Ballard is going to pass up on Mike Green, just like he probably didn't pass up on Leatu Latu. So those are 2 mean edge rushers for Indianapolis.
Yeah. I think it's as simple as that. You don't have to overthink it from a sense of, need or what did we just draft? And, what's going to be the perception of drafting another edge rusher? It's like, no, we didn't miss on Latu. Mike Green's just so good and they're going to play together. And you need 2 edge rushers. You need 3 or 4 edge rushers if you want to be an elite team. And so I think Green's a great pick, and it makes the Falcons pick a lot easier because I was tossing Green with a receiver. Now I think I can go in the receiver direction. I'm going to take the guy that he's my favorite receiver in the draft. He's a slot guy predominantly. He just broke the record for the national champions in, I think it was receptions or receiving yards, one of the 2, but it's Emeka Egbuka. I think he pairs perfectly with Drake London. I think, Darnell Mooney had a little bit of a breakout. He was a really good field stretcher, for Michael Penix, and I think Emeka Egbuka provides a security blanket for Penix with a whole lot of upside. He's not just, little route running slot guy. He's 6 foot. He's over 200 pounds. He can absolutely get open on every play, generate separation. He'll catch the ball. He had 5 drops this year, but it's not, he played 16 games. So the sample size is a little higher. Tons of receptions this season. So, his catch percentage is still good. And Emeka Egbuka will catch the ball. He'll get open. He can provide a little bit for you after the catch, and he will block. And I think that's what the Falcons need. And with, the top 3 edge rushers off the board, I think this would be an easy pick.
Yeah, and you already have Drake London on the outside. This guy fits in the slot receiver role. I mean, what Ohio State receiver hasn't been good lately in the NFL? It's just, it's, LSU and Ohio State, it's like death taxes and those guys being good in the NFL. The Brian Hartline put in some dudes in the NFL. So this is where I'm going to take, and right now it's still a projection, but this is where I'm going to take Josh Simmons for the Arizona Cardinals, right? A couple years ago, they took Paris Johnson Jr. He's coming back off of injury. I think if you put both those guys on the tackle position, or at your tackle positions, whether, it's right tackle and left tackle, depending on which one plays which, that's going to be a huge protection for Kyler Murray, who has had the history of an ACL injury, and he has been running around for his life the last couple of years. But, man, Paris Johnson Jr. and Josh Simmons, those are 2 mountain of men on the outside, depending on who's at right and who's at left tackle. But protecting Kyler Murray is the thing. You just took Marvin Harrison last year. Yeah, you could take Luther Burden, but I think Michael Wilson's a good receiver. So we'll see how it goes. But I think protecting Kyler Murray should be the number 1 priority.
I think so too. You got to protect the guy that's the franchise, and people are so quick to forget how good Kyler Murray has been when he's healthy. And I think they're a year away if they play it right, not from contending for the Super Bowl, but from getting back to that form where the Cardinals were a threat in the NFC. And I think they are close to having the roster to do so. 17, the Bengals. I'm a Ravens fan picking for the Bengals, and I'm going to create my own nightmare and take Luther Burden to either replace T. Higgins or just make that receiver room impossible to match up against. And I do want to say, I know they took Jermaine Burton. There's been a lot of, just story after story with Jermaine Burton off the field. And whether it's his NFL time or when, you had the incident when Tennessee stormed the field and he was at Alabama. I don't know how long, hope Jermaine Burton, it all works out for him, but I don't know how long Cincinnati's going to continue to invest in Jermaine Burton, a guy they took in the 3rd round. Andre Yoshivash has been a better player than Jermaine Burton. I know Burton's got a 1-year sample size, but I think 2nd-year player out of Princeton, he took a huge leap this year. So the Bengals wide receiver room is good, but if they lose T. Higgins, Luther Burden comes in, makes it excellent. Obviously, you have arguably the best receiver in the NFL, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow. This team would be a nightmare on offense for every defense again.
And I think, that they want T. Higgins to stay, but, the cap space is going to be an issue, but it makes it a little bit easier if you say, hey, we're just going to replace him with Luther Burden.
And they still have to sign Jamar.
Yes. And that's a huge thing right there is they have Joe Burrow locked up for a long time on a lot of money, and they have to sign Jamar. So this is an interesting one. I don't want to say I'm going out on a limb. I'm high on this guy. I think he's a really good player, but it might be a reach for some. I'm going to go with Jalen Walker. You think of Mike McDaniel, who's been in the Ravens system. I feel like he wants to have a dynamic, versatile player. This guy can play off-ball linebacker. He's super athletic. He can get to the pass rusher. So I'm going to have Seattle taking Jalen Walker out of the University of Georgia. He's, I call him a hybrid, man. He can kind of do it all. You don't know what role he's going to play. You kind of think of him as Micah Parsons. He can do multiple things, not the Micah Parsons level, but that's the type of Swiss Army knife he can be for a defense. So I'm going to go Jalen Walker for the Seahawks here.
Yeah, and I know anybody watching sees you had to go in, click, scroll down to 51, but I think that's because he's a scheme-dependent player, and that's not a knock. That just means you can't draft Jalen Walker because, he's my next edge rusher on the board. Like, you have to have a plan for your usage of Jalen Walker. He's going to have to develop his bag of pass rush moves, his pass rush plan, because he's better when he's at edge rusher. But that's not to say, I never want him to play linebacker again. And I think somebody like Mike McDonald can come in and say, hey, Jalen Walker, you're way too athletic not to take at 18. We need you. We need both the positions you play. I think Mike McDonald is somebody that can maximize a guy like Jalen Walker. He's somebody that maximized Patrick Queen, who has only been good in the NFL when
Yep.
Mike McDonald was his defensive coordinator. He hasn't been a disappointment in Pittsburgh. He was a disappointment prior to Roquan Smith arriving and Mike McDonald maximizing him. I think Jalen Walker can get a similar treatment. He's more of an edge rusher than PQ, but I think Jalen Walker's a great fit at 18. So I just touched on the Ravens. I'm going to move over to the other flag in my background. I'm going to go with a pick that is slowly picking up steam, I think, to Tampa Bay, who needs DB. And I'm going to take Nick Emanwari, the big safety out of South Carolina. Yep. The style comp, but also the frame comp is pretty close to Cam Chancellor, as close as we've seen from a productive safety. I think this is a guy you don't want to meet when you run a slant route and he's standing in the box or coming down from the deep third and just hitting you. And what I think impresses me the most about Emanwari, not how fast he is or how much of a disruptor he is on defense, is that PFF keeps track, and I think it's become more of a popular stat, turnover-worthy plays. So when a quarterback puts the ball in harm's way, Nick Emanwari doesn't bat those balls down. He intercepts them, and then he returns them for touchdowns. He did it twice, multiple times this season. He had 2 interceptions against Oklahoma, 1 for a pick six against Kentucky. He's an interception machine. He's been doing it his entire career. He's got the catch radius of a bigger wide receiver. I'm going to click on it so I can get his exact measurables, but he's a guy that's 6'3", 227, and massive. He plays like it. It's not a lie. I think if he was at the Senior Bowl, he's a true junior, but if he was at the Senior Bowl, I think those would be verified really similar to exactly what I just read off. I think Emanwari is somebody that's going to continue to climb up draft boards. I'm not just saying it because I'm a Gamecock fan. He's my number 2 safety behind Malachi Starks. And I think 19 and 20 are really big hot spots for him. Those are both teams that need safety and both teams that could use a player that can play in the box and on the back end. Think Kyle Hamilton in terms of alignment. Obviously, that's a lofty comparison, but usage-wise and alignment-wise, that's how I envision him at the next level.
Yeah, we just talked about Jalen Walker, who's a Swiss Army knife. This guy can line up in the box. He's big enough to play in the run. You can blitz him off the edge. You can blitz him in the middle. You can put him deep in the post. Position versatility. It helps you disguise your coverages. He can do a bunch of things. He's a tone setter also. Like, that's a big thing. At the safety position, Cam Chancellor was a tone setter. Like, you knew, hey, if I'm going across the middle of the field with Cam Chancellor there, I'm going to get the shit kicked out or knocked out of me. That's probably the same with Nick Emanwari. So I like that pick. I'm going to take the other tight end here. I know I just said a little bit ago that I wasn't comfortable taking 2 in the top 15, but I think Denver makes too much sense now, where I'm going to take Colston Loveland to the Denver Broncos Colston Loveland to the Denver Broncos. Now, they need a tight end. Bo Nix, a lot better than a lot of people expected. Were you high on Bo Nix last year?
So I was high on Bo Nix to the Broncos. I did a post that kind of described the quarterback class like Tinder and finding a perfect match. Bo Nix to Denver was my match. He was my QB6 because if you put him on any team, I didn't think he was going to have the season he had this year. Yeah. Lands with Sean Payton. He's got that kind of Drew Brees archetype play style. That's the fit, and figured he would take off in that system.
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty high. I think I had Bo Nix as quarterback 4. I had him above J.J. McCarthy. I had him and Penix right by each other, obviously behind the big 3. So I was high on Bo Nix. I think he gets the ball out fast. Like you said, it was a match made in heaven when he went with Sean Payton. But this guy had a 90.6 PFF grade. The dude put up 5 touchdowns, won a national championship 2 years ago for Michigan. He's a passing threat. He can block in the run game. I think it's a no-brainer. There was always a tight end with Drew Brees and Sean Payton like to incorporate. So getting a guy like Colston Loveland, who has the size to, I'm looking at 6'5", 245, down the field threat, down the seams. He can also make people miss. I like Colston Loveland pairing up with Bo Nix. If like Emeka Ibuka was here, I probably would have taken him or Luther Burden, but still a pass catcher for Bo Nix and Colston Loveland is where I'm going to go.
Yeah, and the guy that likes to check the ball down a lot needs a security blanket. And I know Devon Vele was really good, but, I think you got to get somebody in the tight end room. And, somebody that Sean Payton hasn't really had that tight end that can stretch the field. They got Troutman, Atkins, Kroll, somebody else I'm probably missing. But he needs the happy medium between a Greg Dulcich, who he completely phased out of the offense when he got there, and an Adam Troutman, who's not really going to stretch the field. And you mentioned you almost did it to Indy, but I like it better in Denver. This was a team that they're close in Denver. Indy's got some more things they need to work on. So yes. I like the fit a lot. Picking for Pittsburgh. And I went back and forth between, as if you're looking at it visually, quarterback, wide receiver, DB, those are the biggest needs for Pittsburgh. Safety, I'm not going to take it. I'm not going to take a QB. And so you're looking at corner, you're looking at receiver, and it's kind of an unknown what Pittsburgh's going to do at receiver. There's the whole George Pickens situation. But there's a corner on the board who I can't pass up on, and that's the Thorpe winner this year, Jahdae Barron, who I think is an incredible talent at corner. He played a lot in the slot in the box last year, and then they moved him outside, and he took off. I think he's a player that's going to continue to rise. I think wherever he is on anybody's big board is probably too low right now. And I think Barron in Pittsburgh can be a great fit for Mike Tomlin and stop having this defense be picked on in the air.
Yeah, I mean, Pittsburgh's always been good on the defensive side of the ball, and that was kind of one when they started going down and lost the last couple of weeks of the season. You're like, they don't look the same defensively, and so taking Barron here adds them some of that versatility back in the secondary. Chargers here at pick 22. I'm debating on giving Justin Herbert another option, right? They hit on Ladd McConkey. Quentin Johnston was a first-round pick. A part of me wants to take another receiver, but I also think Mykel Williams is way too good to still be on the board right here. So it's kind of the same thing we talked about. It's like, hey, Justin Herbert can score as many points as he wants, but if they can't stop anyone, that don't matter. Yeah. So I'm going to take Mykel Williams, which, yeah, he might not be the best in the run, but this guy can also get after the passer, can create sacks. You got Joey Bosa, who is getting up there in age, but still, him and Williams would be a dynamic duo on the outside. So taking Mykel Williams for the Chargers at 22.
Yeah, and I actually think he's somebody that I think he can hold his own in the run. I think that's going to be important for Jim Harbaugh. Yes. Somebody that really does not like to lose in the trenches. And like you mentioned, Mykel Williams, such a great athlete. Probably too good to be on the board at 22. I want to see some more production out of him. Yeah, you can beat the tackle, you can win, but the stat is the sack. And, the pressures and the hurries are great, but you have to finish the plays. And so we've seen a couple players that didn't have production come into the league and not be able to find it. Odafe Oweh is a guy that had 0 sacks his last year of college, took a second to find his footing. But I think Mykel Williams can be a really talented player in the right spot. LA is a great spot. Green Bay picking next. I think this is a kind of a tough spot for Green Bay, but there's a player that really sticks out for me as a fit for this team. Green Bay is known for liking really big, fast, physical freaks, as they put it. If there's a Feldman's Freaks guy that's going to be available for Green Bay and they like him, they're probably going to take him. I think Shamar Stewart is going to have a really big rise at the Senior Bowl, Combine, Pro Day, pre-draft process. This is a pass rusher, and he is 6'6", 290 pounds. I think he came into the Senior Bowl at 280, 275, a shade under 290. I think if Green Bay can get their hands on him, he's a Packer. And I think that, you have back-to-back edge rushers come off the board there that, maybe they're not in that top 3 group, but they're close. And we're drafting them to contenders now, and that's scary.
Oh, for sure. And this is, kind of like the Lucas Van Ness that they always take. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe some teams aren't hiring him. It's kind of the same thing that you were talking about with Jalen Walker. He's more of a scheme fit. Like, you get him in the right scheme, you get him with a coach that knows how to use him, he's going to be a freak, and he's going to be really good. So I like that pick. I think of the Minnesota Vikings. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with Sam Darnold, but you think of how the heck they ended their season and how bad they were protecting him. I've got to take an offensive lineman. Cam Robinson is a free agent. They have the ability to re-sign him. They have about $60 million in cap space, before they sign any of their guys. But I'm going to take Armand Membu. This is a guy who I'm high on. He measured very well. He was 6'3" and 3'8", so not the tallest. But he also had 34-inch arms. That's the kind of knock of every single guy that's came in, right? It's like, 32 and 5/8 inch arms, right at 33-inch arms. It's not that elite length. Armand Membu has that elite length. tested well, and I'm excited to see him continue at the Senior Bowl against some of the top competition. So let's continue to protect Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy, whoever it is there, and give them Armand Membu.
And let's continue the tackle run because I'm taking Josh Connerly for the Texans, who need offensive line, offensive line, offensive line, and offensive line. And I think, I don't think this is as popular as it might be down the line. I think this might be a more popular take as time goes on. But when you talk about tackles, I don't mean offensive linemen, I mean tackles. We took Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks, and Josh Simmons. I think there's a chance that when April rolls around, that two of the top three or the top two tackles are the guys that we just took, Membu and Josh Connerly, because those guys are tackles. I'm not moving them inside to guard, leaving those guys outside, and I'm comfortable with them there. And I think these two playoff contenders get cornerstones of the offensive line for a long time. I love Membu. He was the pick if you took Connerly. I love Connerly. He's the pick here at 25 for Houston, tackle out of Oregon.
Yeah, those two guys are, like you mentioned, I have no doubt that they are NFL tackles. Like Will Campbell can be an NFL tackle. Kelvin Banks can be an NFL tackle. They probably project inside a little bit more. I would give them a chance to play out there, but yeah, eventually you probably move them closer in. These two, Armand Membu, Josh Connerly, they are offensive tackles for a long time. So, Los Angeles Rams need some corner help. I'm going to go with Benjamin Morrison. Again, another corner. Dealt with an injury a little bit this year, so kind of had a little bit of a down year. Was projected super high in the early mocks, but still has all the talent there. I honestly thought about taking Ravel out of East Carolina, who
I'm glad you didn't.
Yeah, I know you're probably going to take him right here for the Ravens. So that's a guy who was probably a top 15 pick if he doesn't tear his ACL. So we'll see how he does in the pre-draft process, but I'll take Benjamin Morrison for the Rams. And then that probably set you up with a, T-ball. You can just hit it out of the park very easily because that's who you're going to take.
Hey, Siobhan Ravel doesn't have to change any of the colors that he wears to the facility from East Carolina right to the Baltimore Ravens. Siobhan Ravel is a freak athlete at the corner position. Don't scout the helmet. Siobhan Ravel is much better than you might think an East Carolina football player is. 6'3", 193 at the corner position. And the way that he moves and his ball skills, that doesn't come around a lot. And you mentioned the injury. So you're going to get an injury discount wherever he goes because there's no telling where he would have been. He had a hot start to the season. And Morrison as well. He had a hip injury, which is going to scare some teams. Corners with hip injuries, that's kind of the whole position is the hips. Can you flip your hips? Can you keep track with the wide receiver? So those two guys, Morrison out of Notre Dame and Siobhan Ravel out of East Carolina, I think those are guys in terms of the back end of the first round. You might be able to get a little more value, but injury is why they're down there. So it's something to be warned about.
It's a guy I love. I love Ravel, but until you see what he can do off of that injury, you just can't. But the talent's there. The length is there too. Long corner. Can do a lot of things, and so I like that fit for
Me too.
The Ravens. I'm sure you do. You're smiling pretty big right now. So, okay, this is one that just screams Detroit Lion because of his mentality. I'm going to go with Jack Sawyer here. I actually heard this on the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. They were talking about how Jack Sawyer, Aiden Hutchinson, two rivals in college, teaming up to help the Lions win the Super Bowl. I thought that was funny. But, man, you talk about a Dan Campbell guy. I mean, this dude was screaming and so pissed when they lost to Michigan, was a huge part of the national championship run for Ohio State. Just plays every play like he has his hair on fire. He's a Dan Campbell type of guy. And I think that him and Aiden Hutchinson would be fun to watch. He's going to bring that mentality to Detroit. And it just sounds like a Detroit guy for me. So Jack Sawyer to the Lions.
He is. I think he's a Detroit guy. And, I think he's a guy that's going to go in the 20s because he's not the freak athlete that some of these other guys are, like a Michael Williams or a Shamar Stewart. But I think Detroit's going to hold their breath when the LA Chargers and Pittsburgh Steelers come on the clock. And when Jim Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin get to pick, Dan Campbell's heart might skip a couple beats, and then Jack Sawyer's name either gets announced or it doesn't. So I think that's a very Lions-like pick, and it puts the Washington Commanders on the clock, who had an amazing season in Jaden Daniels' first year. And they did it with Terry McLaurin, Olamide Zaccheaus, and De'Ami Brown at wide receiver. And I'm going to add a body to the room. And I think it's got to be an inside guy. I want a slot guy because Terry McLaurin will win on the outside, and he'll beat you deep. But I want somebody that Jaden Daniels can get the ball out quick to. He's going to get open. He's going to separate, and he's going to have really good hands. And in that, on and off Washington run game he's going to block. And this is a guy that I think is going to pick up a little more first round steam as time goes on, and probably, after the Senior Bowl, and that's Xavier Restrepo from Miami, a receiver that I really like a lot. And he is, if you don't count Travis Hunter, at this point in time, a top 3 wide receiver in this class for me, but he's very pick your flavor. He's not going to play on the outside for you. He came in at the Senior Bowl today at 5'9" and 3/8, I think. So he's going to win inside out of the slot. And if you have to manufacture a free release for him, fine. But he's going to get open. He's going to catch the ball, and he'll give you a little flavor after the catch. He might not be a burner, but I think this is somebody that can immediately help the Washington Commanders offense.
I love this guy. I feel like he's going to have like a Ricky Pearsall type climb in this year's class.
Yep.
I think he's going to test relatively well. Like, he's just going to be under the radar. The dude just has a knack for getting open. And that's why I loved Lad McConkey last year. Is like, hey, okay, yeah, maybe he's not the most physically appealing guy, but somehow, like, just get open in the NFL. You just got to know how to get open. And he did that his whole career at Miami. He was the career leading receiver, yards receiver at the University of Miami. I love the pick there, man. I love it there being an option for Jaden Daniels, because I agree. Terry McLaurin had his best year because he finally had some stability at the quarterback position. They're just going to continue to build that chemistry now because he doesn't have to switch quarterbacks every 6 games or whatever. So it's just going to get better and better. So I totally agree. Buffalo at 30. The downfall of the Bills was the cornerback position. I'm going to take a guy who I think is going to have a big climb too, and it is starting to get love, especially after day 1 at the Senior Bowl. It's going to be Trey Amos out of Ole Miss. This is a guy, again, another bigger, longer corner, 6'1", 190 pounds. He forced 13. He had 13 PBUs on the year, which was tied for 12th. Just he has a knack for being around the ball. He's big, he's long, he's physical, and honestly, Buffalo kind of needs every cornerback in this draft to fall to them so they can pick them, but they got to find one in the first round. They need a cornerback badly to help that defense, and hopefully next year, if they have a chance, beat the Chiefs or whoever it is to actually get to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I think Buffalo needs a corner, whoever it was. You saw Kyer Elam come in because of an injury, which is unfortunate, but the reality of it is that when you are a team that wants to win the Super Bowl, if somebody goes down, you got to have somebody slide right in. 31, Philly. The Eagles, obviously, they could be picking 32. They could be picking 31. This is quite before the Super Bowl. But, Philly, I think you could, there's a lot of different directions you could go. Wide receivers popular, but I don't think this is a pass-heavy offense enough to add somebody to the A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith room, at least in the first round. There's an offensive guard that is one of the safest picks in this draft class. And to me, he's not somebody that I would take, if you're playing, if you're planning a rebuild or if you're in the process of building a team. And it's Tyler Booker. But hold on one second, because I have to check the Senior Bowl measurements from Marcus Mbow, who's a Purdue offensive lineman who I also might take.
He had exactly 33-inch arms. I bookmarked his thing on Twitter because that was another guy I was looking at.
Yeah, Marcus Mbow is going to be an Eagle today. I think Marcus Mbow is a really, really underrated draft prospect, somebody that hasn't played on the inside yet. He's absolutely a guard. He could really, really be a center. I think if he's a center, he could be the best center in this entire draft. The Eagles win with their offensive line, but they have to keep adding because it seems like every year the Eagles got to worry about somebody retiring or somebody retiring in 2 years. And I think it's really important for them to prepare in advance. And you saw one of those prepare in advance picks come to fruition with Jalix Hunt on the edge. And he ended up playing a lot and playing really well. So I think Marcus Mbow is a guy that Philly, it's almost a luxury pick because they can afford to take somebody that might not have to play right away for them. But I think they need to address the offensive line in some way early.
I agree. And the one guy that is on an expiring contract is Mekhi Becton for them. Yep. And I think that Mbow, after a year or two, could be better than Tyler Steen, who they took out of Alabama a couple of years ago. So again, yeah, they're in the Super Bowl. They don't have many needs. And there's not a Georgia player that's up here that they could take. I mean, I'm sure they could find one. They love taking their Georgia guys, but I agree. Take a guy. He can sit behind Cam Jurgens, Landon Dickerson, learn for a year, and then be ready to go for them. So I like that pick. Here, I think the Kansas City Chiefs, Chris Jones, he's been dominant for them, but at some point his career is going to come to an end. He's going to retire. He's going to get out of it. So I'm going to take a replacement for him that can come and play right away. This is another guy. I feel like there's been a lot of guys that I've had the ability to draft that have not been, they shouldn't be available based on their talent alone.
Yeah.
And that's going to be Kenneth
there's
Grant
guys that there's guys that we haven't taken that shouldn't be available. Like the fact that you at 32 are deciding between Kenneth Grant or a Walter Nolan. This draft class is deep.
Yes, this is definitely deep. So I'm going to end with the Chiefs taking Kenneth Grant for them. I mean, he kind of gets overshadowed by Mason Graham, but this is a guy who was also very productive. 23 hurries, 3 sacks from the interior defensive line position, 6'3", 340 pounds, big ol' sucker in the interior. So a guy that can replace, hopefully one day, play aside and then replace Chris Jones for the Kansas City Chiefs. And again, yeah, like you mentioned, they could be picking 31 or 32. I don't think that would, I would have taken Kenneth Grant at 31, and I assume you would have taken Membo at 32. So that's absolutely, not set in stone, but I think that those two picks for us, they wouldn't have changed based off of their draft position. So no,
and we can read through this one more time real quick. I'll go ahead, but just 1 through 32, and what is a good draft class. This isn't just because the quarterback class is not top tier. It does not mean these aren't good players, but we have Tennessee taking Cam Ward, the quarterback out of Miami. The Browns get Abdul Carter, the edge rusher from Penn State. The Giants get Travis Hunter, the two-way player out of Colorado. The Patriots get Teteroa McMillan, receiver out of Arizona. The Jags get Mason Graham, the interior defensive lineman from Michigan. The Raiders get quarterback out of Colorado, Shadur Sanders. Jets, Tyler Warren, the tight end from Penn State. The Panthers, Will Johnson, corner from Michigan. The Saints, Will Campbell, tackle guard from LSU. The Bears, Kelvin Banks, tackle from Texas. The 49ers get James Pierce Jr., the edge rusher from Tennessee. Cowboys take Ashton Genty, running back from Boise State. Dolphins take Malachi Stark, safety from Georgia. The Colts get Mike Green, edge rusher from Marshall. The Falcons take Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver from Ohio State. Cardinals, Josh Simmons, tackle from Ohio State. The Bengals take Luther Burden, the receiver out of Missouri. The Seahawks take Jalen Walker, the edge rusher linebacker out of Georgia. Buccaneers take Nicky Manwari, safety out of South Carolina. The Broncos take Colston Loveland, tight end out of Michigan. The Steelers take Jahdae Barron, defensive back out of Texas. The Chargers take Michael Williams, the edge rusher from Georgia. Packers, Shamar Stewart, edge rusher from A&M. Vikings, Armand Membu, tackle from Missouri. The Texans take Josh Connerly, tackle out of Oregon. Rams, Benjamin Morrison, corner from Notre Dame. The Ravens, Siobhan Ravel, the corner from East Carolina. The Lions, Jack Sawyer, the edge rusher from Ohio State. The Commanders, Xavier Restrepo, the receiver from Miami. The Bills, Trey Amos, corner from Ole Miss. The Eagles take Marcus Mbow, interior offensive lineman from Purdue. And the Chiefs take the 4th Michigan player in the first round, Kenneth Grant, interior defensive lineman.
That's I mean, we're hearing things that there's some teams only have like 10 to 12 first round players, but again, I don't think it has the top end talent. Like there's just without the quarterback class being strong, it doesn't have the top end talent, but there's a lot of good players in this class, man. And there's still good players left on the board. I know we didn't do a second round mock draft. We'll bump it up to that eventually, but there's still a lot of really good players on the board for the second round that are going to be NFL contributors. Just because they probably wouldn't be first round picks in last year's class or whatever, it feels like they're solid NFL players that are going to have a good long NFL career. So I like it. I mean, for mock draft number 1, I thought it went good.
Yeah, I thought that went great. Lots of potential starters. We kind of went through all those team needs. I know we'll probably be better about, saying I did at the end, but the players, where they went to college, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think that's a really good 1.0. Lots of fun picks, lots of safe picks, and lots of future projections as well.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what the NFL draft has become. There's been so many hit and misses in the first round. There's been a lot of guys that have been in the 4th, 5th, and 6th round that have become, Pro Bowl type of guys. It's a projection league, and that's what makes the draft so fun, makes it so hard. Is it's a lot of people that have, I don't want to say opinions, but it's like, hey, I value this over this, or I think that this translates to the NFL. It's, we'll see who's right or wrong, and it usually takes 2 or 3 years. As a Patriots fan, Mac Jones looked great year 1, and he fell off the face of the earth. Jaden Daniels looked really good this year, and I expect him to continue to be good. But it's like, what guys are going to continue to develop, what guys are continuing to get better, and what guys don't. So
yeah,
I'm excited for this class.
I'm getting year one of Rashad Bateman right now.
Yes, yeah. You are. And it's 3 years after he got drafted, right? How long is he?
He came into the league with Devontae Smith and all those guys, Kadarius Toney, that draft class, 2022. Yeah.
So I mean, it took him. Quentin Johnston had a bad year one, and he
2021
started to pick it up.
2021 for Rashad Bateman.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's guys all the time that, okay. The NFL is a hard league, guys. Even no matter how great college football is and how good of a player they were, the NFL's hard no matter who you are. So take some time, but no, man, I'm excited for this. If you guys are on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe. If you guys are on audio only and you want to see the draft process, we had the PFF mock draft simulator pulled up. You guys can go over to the YouTube. It's just Draft Geeks on YouTube and then Draft Geeks podcast on Apple or Spotify. So make sure you guys find that. Follow us on anything and follow us on Instagram if you want to stay up to date on, our individual pages. But man, I'm really excited to continue to dive into this process, get into some big boards, some position rankings, scouting reports, talk some Senior Bowl, combine, stuff like that. It's going to be fun.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for tuning in to episode 1.